is Wednesday, September 13th. Entire neighborhoods decimated by Hurricane Irma. A stark look at the devastation and a first-hand account from survivors of the storm.
We stayed, and I'll never do it again. I regret doing it. My family, we were in danger.
There you have it. President Trump now planning to visit the disaster zone as recovery efforts begin.
Florida won't be his only stop. The president hitting the road to pitch his tax cuts directly to the American people. We're live in Washington.
I don't know how people who voted for Donald Trump can feel comfortable at all watching ESPN when they know the values that network espouses and how unwelcome their own values are.
And ESPN at the center of yet another controversy after one of their anchors calls the president a white supremacist. How the network is now responding. Fox and Friends First starts right now.
You're watching Fox and Friends First. I'm Todd Pyro in for Rob Schmidt.
And I'm Heather Childers. Thank you very much for joining us, as always. So as the president works to gain bipartisan support on tax reform, will this strategy be enough to pass real reform by the end of the year? Two questions there. So here to debate, founder of Bold.Global, Carrie Sheffield, and Democratic strategist Chuck Rocha. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Heather.
Great to be here, Heather.
Carrie, I will start with you. Is this a good strategy to make a deal?
Well, this is exactly what Ronald Reagan did. He needed to get bipartisan support to get it over the finish line. So I think this is smart. I also think the Democrats are going to be on defense in 2018. There are 25 seats that are up for senators who are Democrats, including 10 who are in states that President Trump handily won in 2016. So Democrats are vulnerable, so they're going to need to make some deals here. And we've seen, Mitch McConnell didn't come through on health care, so President Trump is going to have to come in and step in and fill that void, and I think that's exactly what we need.
Well, Chuck, the art of the deal, he seems to know what he's doing. Do you think this is a good idea?
Look, to get something done with this president's a good idea for him and his party. Let's be clear. The Republicans control everything in Washington, D.C., from the White House to the Senate. And Kerry actually makes a really good point about the Senate. Those 10 senators who are Democrats are in vulnerable places. But let's talk about the House. There are 25 Republicans in the House where Hillary Clinton carried their district. What Donald Trump needs to do is move his party, and he can do this without almost every Democrat. The only 3 Democrats he needs just so happens he had them over to the White House. The last thing I'll say is he's got a lot to do with his own party. Even with hurricane relief, something that should be easy. There was a bunch of Republicans from Texas, because of our expenses and our debt ceiling, said no to even recovery for their own state, so he has a long way to go.
And Carrie, speaking of a long way to go, he is going to take this on the road and a significant push to try to sell this to the American people. Do you think that will be successful?
I think that's smart. I think, again, that's exactly what he needs to do. That's the president at his best, is when he's talking directly to the people. That's how he won. He bypassed that whole establishment, the swamp, if you will, people who, were upset. Not everything the president said was kosher or even I agreed with. But at the same time, when you're talking about tax reform, that's something that affects everyone at every income bracket. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he can go on a retail level and talk to the heart of America and say, this is what tax reform means for you in a very tangible way. That is the populist economic reform. So, and the way the Democrats are going to spin this, or they're going to say, oh, this is tax cuts for the rich. But you know what? No, this is tax cuts for everyone. And those people who are more wealthy, they create more jobs for everyone.
Well, we will see how it plays out. Chuck, thank you so much. Carrie, we appreciate you joining us as always. And we didn't even plan this. We all wore purple today.
How about that?
Hey,
have a great
thank you. Todd?
All right, Heather, thank you. Now to the devastation left behind by Hurricane Irma. The American death toll has reached at least 12 in the state of Florida. In Key West alone, authorities say 25% of homes are destroyed and 90% are damaged. But across the state, more than 5 million people still without power this morning. President Trump plans to survey the damage firsthand tomorrow.
The president's action during these times demonstrate why he's a true leader who can bring the country together and get things done for the American people.
But first, the State Department sending evacuation flights today for U.S. citizens still stranded in St. Martin and the British Virgin Islands. We have live team coverage in Florida. Griff Jenkins live on Marco Island. But we begin with Peter Ducey in Jacksonville, where they're expecting even more historic flooding. Peter, good morning.
Todd, good morning. Here in Jacksonville, more than 106,000 people still without power in dark neighborhoods like this one, where power lines still lie beneath giant trees that snapped when Irma came to town. In Jacksonville, there are about 1,400 at last check still in shelters. That's roughly half how many there were in shelters during the storm. But many schools are going to be closed for a long time here because schools are being used as shelters for the displaced. Hundreds had to be rescued from high water here in Jacksonville, and now the sheriff's office is urging people to get out before they need to be saved in dangerous swift currents running up their streets if it happens again. They tweeted this: "We hope the 356 people who had their lives saved yesterday will take evacuation orders more seriously in the future." And the mayor, Lenny Curry, explained the reasoning like this.
We're not trying to be difficult. We're not trying to make people's lives inconvenient. I think the governor was saying it best leading up to this. Evacuations are not about convenience. They're about safety. And so we just want people to be safe.
A critical job for authorities now becomes getting gas into affected areas. And the Florida governor, Rick Scott, says that as ports open and tanker ships with fuel start sailing in, the Florida Highway Patrol will have 20 troopers assigned to getting gas into places where the pumps dried up during the mass exit from Florida a few days ago, and now the slow return back for residents who evacuated. Todd and Heather.
Peter Ducey live for us in Jacksonville, Florida this morning. Pete, thanks.
Thank you. Well, on the west coast of Florida, in the meantime, the grim reality now setting in for another picture-perfect community.
Griff Jenkins picks up our live team coverage on Marco Island with incredible new images of the damage. Griff, good morning.
Good morning, Todd and Heather. You know, shortly after 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, Irma slammed into Marco, making second landfall as a Category 3 hurricane with 130-mile-an-hour winds, and it certainly left this island covered in about 2 feet of water. We spoke to one of the residents as we came here yesterday to get a first look. The residents all being let back in yesterday. We talked to Daniel Wilmath, who rode out Andrew, rode out Wilma, and he rode out Irma, and says he'll never do it again. Take a listen.
We stayed, and I'll never do it again. I regret doing it. My family, we were in danger. The roof failed. The sliding glass windows burst in. It was the most frightening experience, and I should have listened to the authorities.
Now, the storm surge, much like along Naples coast, was not as expected as threatening and devastating, although they got some 8 to 10 feet. Remarkably, the police captain, Dave Baer of Marco Island, reported no deaths and no serious injuries here. And today, this morning, I was stunned to see a tweet from Marco Island's police department that said 40% of the island's power has been restored. More tomorrow, meaning today. Great job, and that is for sure. Unfortunately, the situation a little south from us in the Keys, where Irma made first landfall, obviously not nearly as fortunate as the folks here. More than 90% of the homes there devastated. They're in much need of power, fuel, food, and all the necessities, guys.
Yeah, I think that they have done a remarkable job, though. It could have been so much worse.
I mean, look at the lack of loss of life. Great point, Heather. Griff, thanks. All right, North Korea calling the latest round of economic sanctions from the UN, quote, evil and illegal, but President Trump sending a strong warning to the rogue regime.
It was nice to get a 15-0 vote, but those sanctions are nothing compared to what ultimately will have to happen.
The sanctions ban North Korea's textile exports and limit oil imports after South Korea says it detected radioactive gas from a nuclear detonation.
Well, a big legal win for President Trump's travel restrictions. The Supreme Court will allow the White House to ban thousands of refugees from entering the U.S. The move comes after 5 justices backed up Justice Kennedy's decision to block a lower court's ruling that the policy is unconstitutional. Justices will hear full arguments on travel restrictions next month.
Thousands of religious leaders calling on House Speaker Paul Ryan to find a solution to ending DACA. The 3,400 church leaders from all 50 states supporting so-called dreamers, saying many biblical figures, including Jesus, were immigrants. The letter reading, quote, as Americans, we are proud that our country has affirmed this biblical principle of valuing and protecting immigrants while also protecting national security, end quote. The Trump administration has given Congress 6 months to find a solution to the Obama-era immigration policy.
Well, there is a new addition to the Trump family. President Trump's son, Eric, and wife, Lara, welcoming their first child, a baby boy.
There's the cutie, the new father, tweeting, Lara Trump and I are excited to announce the birth of our son, Eric Luke Trump, at 8:50 this morning. He is President Trump's 9th grandchild. Congrats to the whole family.
Yes, congratulations.
Time now, 10 minutes after the hour, a brand new Benghazi bombshell about the role Hillary Clinton's State Department played.
Was the State Department contract officer trying to silence you?
Oh, absolutely.
The exclusive new details you'll only see on Fox News.
Anyone who believes that there is no such thing as global warming must be blind or unintelligent.
And Hollywood, go figure, playing politics at a benefit meant for hurricane victims. Was this really the right platform? Welcome back to Fox and Friends. First 5 years after the attacks in Benghazi that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Christopher Stevens, 2 security contractors are breaking their silence.
Yeah, they say they were pressured to keep quiet by the Clinton State Department because they knew too much. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has this exclusive report.
Was the State Department contract officer trying to silence you?
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. ambassador is dead, and nobody is held accountable for it. And 3 guys who tried to defend him all died.
The people who made the poor choices that actually, I would say, were more responsible for the Benghazi attacks than anyone else, they're still in the same positions, making security choices for our embassies overseas now.
Jerry Torres, a former Green Beret, is the president and CEO of Torres Advanced Enterprise Solutions, which supplies security for U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. And along with Brad Owens, a former Army intelligence officer, they have more than 45 years of service. Speaking exclusively to Fox, they have firsthand knowledge of the security nightmare on the ground in Benghazi, Libya, before the 2012 terrorist attack. In the spring of 2012, Torres bid on the security contract for the State Department compound in Benghazi, but the nearly $700,000 deal, handled by State Department contracting officer Jan Visentainer, went to a mysterious foreign company, Blue Mountain Group. The guards were local hires through another company and not armed. This classified cable, first reported by Fox News, shows that by mid-August 2012, Ambassador Stevens and his team knew they were in trouble, warning the State Department that radical Islamic groups were everywhere.
It was a disaster.
They were sending these cables back to the contracting guys and the decision makers back here, and they weren't responding. It's gross incompetence or negligence, one of the two. They came back to us and said, can you guys come in and take over security? So we were ready. I mean, you know, unfortunately, 12 days later, the ambassador was killed.
After the attack, emails show Blue Mountain was advised not to talk. Torres and Owens claim they got the same order, and the State Department contracting officer Visentainer went further.
What did the State Department contract officer say?
She said that I and people from Torres should not speak to the media, should not speak to any officials with respect to the Benghazi program.
The State Department declined our request to make Visentainer available, and the men allege repercussions have continued against their company.
Since that conversation, we bid on 20 security force contracts for U.S. embassies and lost 18.
Do you feel more comfortable coming forward now because there's been a change in administration?
Given that the politics has been taken out of the Benghazi situation, now that there's no longer a candidate or anything related to it, we have an opportunity here to fix the problems that made it happen.
In Washington, Catherine Herridge, Fox News.
Obviously, a lot of people talking about that. A lot of people talking about this as well. ESPN responding after an anchor on the 4-letter network calls President Trump a white supremacist. Check out this tweet. It says, Donald Trump is a white supremacist who has largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists, and that came from 6 p.m. anchor and host Jamel Hill.
And here's what ESPN had to say in a statement regarding that. ESPN says the comments on Twitter from Jamel Hill regarding the president do not represent the position of ESPN. We have addressed this with Jamil, and she recognizes her actions are inappropriate. But what actions have they taken against her for what she did?
You know, it's a situation whereby if you look at ESPN's history, as a Yankee fan, I'm never going to defend Kurt Schilling, but You need to defend Curt Schilling in this instance because Curt Schilling made comments on the right. And do you see him on ESPN anymore? No. There's also a business side to this. And Clay Travis, Fox Sports reporter, writer at Outkick, had a really interesting take. Listen to this.
I always like to point to Michael Jordan, guy who became a billionaire because he's good at putting a ball in a basket and good at dunking the basketball. You remember what he said? Republicans buy sneakers too. Well, if ESPN were smart, they wouldn't be going to war with conservatives and Republicans and Donald Trump voters. They would be acknowledging that that should be the backbone of their brand. Instead, they're pushing them away, saying that you're white supremacist, you're not welcome here. I don't know how people who voted for Donald Trump can feel comfortable at all watching ESPN when they know the values that that network espouses and how unwelcome their own values are.
And it definitely exemplifies the growing political divide within ESPN itself. And then that, of course, transfers onto its viewers.
Right. They used to do sports over there at ESPN.
Yeah. At some point, they used to.
All right, let's keep talking about ESPN. Should network anchors be playing politics, or should they just stick to sports?
Yeah, weigh in on our Facebook page right after the show and use the hashtag #KeepTalking and let us know what you think.
Time now, 19 minutes after the hour. Stranded thousands of miles away from home, the hotel accused of leaving a group of tourists deserted in Irma's disaster zone.
Hillary Clinton's new book is on store shelves right now, but she made fans wait for hours at her book signing.
Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115 is here with the internet's answer to the question, what happened?
What happened?
Well, Hillary Clinton did kick off her book tour for that book, What Happened, yesterday, right here in New York City. And I gotta say, her fans came out in full force. Some of them even slept outside overnight and waited over 12 hours for the event to start. But then they were actually forced to wait a little longer because Clinton wound up showing up an hour late to her own event. Yikes, not good. Now,